Hey everybody, it's Tuesday, March 19th, 2026. Welcome to the NFL Fantasy Football Podcast, where we're happy to help in pass protection. It's me, your man, MG Marcas Grant, joined by Michael F. Florio and LaQuan Jones. Happy start of the tournament, guys. I know it's not fantasy football, but happy March Madness to those who observe.
I enjoy it. I won't act like I've watched a lot of college basketball this year. I used to be huge into college basketball, but it doesn't matter, right? Like I don't need to know any of the players on the TV for me to enjoy today and tomorrow. Like,
do not care.
It's gonna be a great time.
I would say the next 2 weekends, this weekend and next weekend, are maybe two of the greatest weekends in sports just because there's wall-to-wall basketball on from like 9 a.m. Pacific time until, late in the evening. And, I feel bad for the poor folks who get their prices right preempted or I know my grandmother didn't particularly care for it because her soap operas got pushed because of basketball. But for the rest of us, it is a great time, an absolutely great time.
We are supposed to watch together this weekend. I don't know if you guys are still coming through, but we're supposed to.
Oh, I'm pulling up.
Working on it for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. So that'll be fun. It's gonna be a good time. Be a good time. So today on the show, going to have a kind of a different time. Should be a good time nonetheless. We're going to talk to James Reber, who does research for the Next Gen Stats team here at the NFL. Wrote a couple of articles that maybe on the surface you wouldn't think about as fantasy-related articles, but we are trying to find a fantasy spin. He talked about the increase in chip blocks across NFL offenses, also talked about the rise of split safeties, too high coverages across the NFL. And so we're going to kind of pick his brain a little bit on how those things could help you when you are sort of picking between players and putting together your fantasy draft lists and what have you. But do want to start with a little bit of news, and I emphasize a little bit because there's not a lot happening in the NFL, but a story that popped up that LaQuan, you texted us about yesterday. 4-time Pro Bowl wide receiver T.Y. Hilton has announced his retirement, which I'm sure comes as news to a lot of people because we haven't seen T.Y. Hilton in the NFL in a few years. The last time he played was back in 2022 when he appeared in 3 games with the Dallas Cowboys.
Wow.
Either way, Eugene Marquis Hilton is officially wrapping it up, calling it a career.
Why you put my man government out there like that?
I mean, I'm better. I don't know what his mom calls him. I don't know if she calls him Eugene or T. She calls him Eugene probably when he's in trouble. Probably just calls him T.Y. the rest of the time. So I will ask the question that I always ask in these situations. Florio, I will start with you, and LaQuan, you can follow. Is T.Y. Hilton a fantasy Hall of Famer?
I'm more so wondering where he got this TY name from because the only T in his entire government name is in Hilton and there's no Y. So where did this come from? I have no idea. I have questions. No, he's not a fantasy Hall of Famer. He's a Hall of Very Good, I would say. I think when we talk about the 2010s, and the top wide receivers, he's not going to be the first name or one of the first names that get thrown out, but he will get thrown out there, right? He was really good for a big stretch. And in fact, if you, outside of his rookie year, where he put up 861 yards, every other season that he got to play with Andrew Luck, he topped 1,000 yards. Most of them, he topped 1,200 because there's the 1 year in 2017 where he failed to get 1,000, but Andrew Luck didn't play that year. So I think you could point for 2 reasons why he's not a fantasy Hall of Famer. One, was it the age cliff? Because he happened to be turning 30 when Andrew Luck just surprised everyone and retired. But once Luck retired, it was kind of a wrap for Hilton. And it's not his fault, but it was early career Jacoby Brissett and Phillip Rivers and Carson Wentz. The quarterbacks they were throwing out there they left a lot to be desired. So, I think that really does hamper his career numbers a bit. Also, he was a player that once that cliff came, it came very fast. But there was a 6-7 year stretch where he was a top 2 round pick in fantasy and was just electric. So Hall of Very Good, in my opinion.
All right. LaQuan, you agree with that?
I second that. The Hall of Very Good is filled right now with a bunch of players. But, like, I feel like if Andrew Luck didn't retire, like, he could have been in that Hall of Fame fantasy, room. But because at the end of the day, those 2 seasons he had that were magnificent, 1,400 yards. I mean, he didn't really find the end zone much, but the ceiling was going to keep rising if Andrew Luck stayed. And honestly, the surprise, retirement, I think that's what kind of knocked him off his track to have that ceiling to keep, rising. So the Hall of Very Good is filled right now. And that's not a bad thing, but we got some Hall of Famers in there that I can't honestly see T.Y. Hilton sitting next to him, any of those guys really, for real.
Yeah, no, I think you guys are right, because you remember the highs, but until you go back and look, you realize that that peak was a really short period of time.
Yeah. He was a top 5 fantasy wide receiver that year. He put up 1,400 yards, and that's with little touchdowns. So all that production was through yards and catches and stuff. But again, the cliff, it came very fast. It was like Wile E. Coyote just standing in midair, and then all of a sudden just falls down.
By the way, to answer your question, Florio, he says that even though his name is Eugene, my daddy's name is Tyrone. So ever since I was little, everyone has just used the first 2 letters of that. And that is how he became T.Y. Hilton. So there it is.
So then instead of being Ty, he made it T.Y.
T.Y.
Okay. I mean,
it's a long way to get there. He does have a son named Ty. So, I guess it's coming full circle.
Ty or T.Y.?
Yeah. He has 2 sons, Eugene Hilton Jr. and Ty Hilton. So he sort of combined all of those things. But again, he named him Ty, not T.Y. Like yes,
it's a long. I don't know. But one fun fact about him, real quick, is every year for his first 7 seasons, he had a catch of 60+ yards, over 60 yards every year. And to me, that is always what I'll remember with T.Y. Hilton. He was one of the very best field stretchers of his era. He had deficiencies, like we said, the red zone, not really a high touchdown guy, but one of the very best field stretchers.
Well, that he used to absolutely torture the Houston Texans. That was just the thing he did. 11 touchdown catches against the Texans in his career. He didn't have more than 6 against any other team. So he just absolutely just destroyed the Texans.
I remember him too throwing Seth Rollins over the barricade at a Bears game also. So that was pretty awesome to see as well.
That's pretty random. That's super random. Other piece of news, Carson Wentz is returning to the Minnesota Vikings on a 1-year deal. So LaQuan, does that mean that 9 has officially been 86th from the Vikings offense?
Stop calling this man 9. Stop. There's only one 9. Yes, it's 86. Get him out of here.
He doesn't call himself 9. Matthew Stafford doesn't call himself 9. Calls himself
Yes,
Matt.
we do.
Or Matty.
I
or
can't
John.
say what I can't say here what we call him, but the Rams community have a name for 9, and it's not JJ McCarthy. And honestly,
but obviously it's obviously not 9 either if you can't say it here.
Hey, it is. It's a Rams.
You can't say it here. It's not 9.
I think if you polled football fans who is 9, you're gonna get more JJ McCarthy votes than
Matthew Stafford. You just are. Like it's just what's out there in the zeitgeist now, man. Just live with it.
Didn't we have this conversation here that these guys need to earn the cool nickname? Like how I stopped calling Trevor Mid-Lawrence, now he is T-Law.
People don't call JJ McCarthy 9 because they think it's cool. They call him 9 to sort of mock him a little bit. Like it's just like to needle him.
Because he thinks he's 9. Yeah. Don't use it as a troll. When I think of 9, it is Matthew Stafford.
Anyway, answer the question. Anyway, is he done?
Anyway, it is cooked. Well done in the crock pot. This has been a slow cooking, but he is done. Looking at Carson Wentz back in there, backing up Kyler Murray, he now falls to QB3. I could sense probably a trade is coming, or maybe he just sits behind 2 veteran quarterbacks and learn and absorb as much as he can. But at the end of the day, I don't think we see JJ McCarthy hit the field unless both of these guys get injured. But again, I feel like we need to stop giving cool nicknames to guys. Even though you're trolling, stop giving nicknames to people who haven't earned these things, man. Please.
We didn't give it to him. He gave it to himself. That's why he's getting trolled by it. Like, he gave it to himself, and now we're using it, and now people are using it back at, throwing it back at him
say it
as a way to
anymore.
troll.
Just stop.
Like,
stop.
It's not a shot at your dude.
If you go to Pro Football
not
Reference,
everything is an attack on the Rams, man. Like,
I'm
you gotta
not
get out
saying
of your feelings.
it's a shot or attack. It's
Get
just
out of
we
your
need to stop
feelings.
doing this. No.
if you go to Pro Football Reference, which legitimately, if someone on the street one time called a person a nickname, it appears on their page. JJ McCarthy's nickname is 9. Matthew Stafford does not have a nickname.
Well, does that mean that somebody on the street once called Tom Brady the Pharaoh? Because that's on
Someone had to. It's on there, right? Like
the prince who was promised, Trevor Lawrence. Like who said that?
Yeah, I don't know.
that's a certain Fox Sports analyst who
Actually
who
no.
gave him that nickname.
Kyle Brandt said that. He's actually the one who created that. Actually, I've texted him about it. And he was the prince who was promised.
I've heard another analyst call him that for a while now as well.
Sure.
Who doesn't work in our building.
Well, again, that's the thing that, instead of calling him Trevor Mid-Lawrence, you can call him the prince who was promised if he starts playing bad.
He's earned it.
You can just use that.
He's
earned
earned
back at him. So there it is. All right. Very happy to be joined by a special guest doing something that, we don't necessarily get too much into, sort of the, I guess, off the beaten path version of the next gen stats. And to help us with that, James Reber, a researcher for NGS here at the NFL, and wrote an article recently about chip blocks. Not that they're a new thing across the NFL, but they're starting to be deployed more often and in a more strategic way to sort of help offenses' passing game. So we're glad to get James in here to sort of talk about the article he wrote and try to put a fantasy context to it, because we're all looking for whatever edge we can find. So James, appreciate you taking the time, man. How you feeling today?
Hey, I'm doing well, man. Thank you so much for having me on. Really excited to be here. I'm glad that you've all looked through my work and you had, the good sense to figure out that this was relevant and we could get something out of it. I didn't even really expect that tight ends would be doing so much extra work off of their blocks. And that's something that I found just, working through the research for this and then even working with Kari the last few weeks, that this is a massive trend, something that is going under the radar, but can really help us out.
Yeah, and like you said, we didn't have the good sense. Kyrie had the good sense to find the article, to bring it to our attention, and help organize this whole thing. So we're just the dopes who get to sit on camera and on the microphone and talk about it. But just for the base level, right, for the entry level folks, explain what chip blocks are and how they benefit an offense.
No doubt. Let's do it. So chip blocks are a trend that has come about. Like you were saying, Marcus, it's something that has been going on throughout the entire history of the league, just happening a lot more recently, where a skill position player, usually a tight end, occasionally a running back or a wide receiver, will give a little bit of extra blocking help, will engage a pass rusher quickly, and then kind of roll off that and go out into a route. And so it kind of lets the offense have their cake and eat it too, where you're getting an extra guy in your pass protection. A lot of teams like spread offenses at this point in time. And so if you have a 5-man protection, you can turn that into kind of 5.5. And so that has given quarterbacks extra time to throw. We've actually seen that since Next Gen started tracking chip blocks, which was 7 seasons ago, the time to pressure is about 0.6 of a second longer, 3.4 seconds versus 2.8 when a chip block is used. And I mean, 0.6 is not a huge amount of time in the grand scheme of things, but for a quarterback, it can mean absolutely everything. It allows them to go through their progressions, get their deep ball off, avoid the sack. So, the best offensive innovators out there, we talk about the Rams and Niners a lot on this show, and they heavily feature chip blocks in their offense, and it's kind of picking up league-wide as well.
So in the article, you talk about how these quarterbacks, like you just said, they get extra time. We've seen their air yards go up, more opportunity to take the deep ball, the deep shot, stuff like that. But what surprised me was the teams that chipped at a higher rate don't always put up better offensive numbers. In fact, in some cases, you point out it's the opposite and they struggle. So What did you find when you were looking at that? Because that was surprising to me.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go out and tell you that, chip blocks are exclusively an advantage creator. Sometimes it's more the case that a team is forced to do it because their pass protection isn't really holding up. The Vikings and Browns were two teams that come to mind that had a little bit of a weaker offensive line this season. They had a lot of, injuries and turnover on their fronts. They also had, young quarterbacks who weren't quite as good as evading pressure on their own. And so they had to get extra guys in the protection just in order to kind of stay above water. So you will see that sometimes. And I'm not going to tell you, we get these offenses that are chipping more. You want to draft everyone from those offenses. That's not really the case. But we're going to, go into how we can make it helpful for fantasy on a case-by-case basis.
So you talk about how this has been something that's been tracked for several years now, but it seems to be trending upward from 21% in 2023 to nearly 27% this past season. I mean, what's driving this usage upward, and is there a ceiling, or do you think this keeps climbing?
So there's actually a lot of different contributors to this. I do think there is eventually a ceiling, but I don't think we're at it or even super close to it yet. So we discussed that the Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, and their proteges, the Kevin O'Connells, the Liam Cohens, the Klint Kubiaks, these are the guys who are leading this charge. And what happens with guys like that is when they start doing something, the rest of the league kind of takes it over time. What we saw 5 or 10 years ago was everyone started using motion. And everyone had always used motion, but started doing it much more often, especially starting with that coaching tree. And now that's kind of reached an equilibrium. Everyone's doing it all over the league, whether you're part of that tree or not. And so as those other coaches pick the chip block up, it'll keep increasing. And I think, it's going to be really interesting to monitor where it goes the next few years.
I know some of the data showed kind of a split amongst tight ends. You kind of talked about it a little bit, but guys like Trey McBride, Kyle Pitts, they sort of thrived when working with chip blocks. Guys like Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Mark Andrews saw their numbers dip. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is maybe, I don't know if it's age, is it offense? Have you been able to pinpoint kind of why that is, or is it still a mystery?
I think both of those are contributors, yeah. I think in the case of, there were 3 guys I found who were not really thriving on it, using it as much of an advantage as some of the other tight ends. And those were Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Mark Andrews. In the case of those guys, they've been in the league for a long time, and they probably didn't come up with the concept in mind that this was going to be part of their repertoire. So Kittle is a little bit of a special case, and I think it's just because Kittle loves blocking compared to most other pass catching tight ends in the league. So he's going to set a really good block and then not, go as smoothly necessarily into the route. In Kittle's case, he just didn't get quite as many targets as the other guys, is what it was. Kelce was not running quite as sharp of a route in those cases and wasn't catching as many passes when he did get targeted. And then with some of the younger guys, so the interesting one, I guess, is Hunter Henry, because Hunter Henry, if you saw on that graphic, he actually had 100% catch rate off of his chips. He caught every single one of his 21 targets after a chip block. And he's a veteran guy too. So I think that's a schematic thing. I think he was just given a blueprint by Josh McDaniels, new offensive coordinator the past year. And he was able to adjust to that really quickly and, improve his performance in those situations. Only a 59.1% catch rate when he's not chipping, 100 when he is. That's something that I think you're going to see a lot in their offense next year with, if they're recognizing that his success is coming from that, which I'm sure they are.
And to take this and spin it kind of specifically into a specific player for fantasy aspects. On that graphic there, we saw AJ Barner chipped at the highest rate last year, and he had the second highest target rate when chipping.
Yeah.
Well, now Klint Kubiak, who designed that offense and was using AJ Barner in that way, he gets to design an offense with Brock Bowers.
Yeah.
So do you think we see Brock Bowers chipping at a high rate? And if so, do you think there is still another level that Brock Bowers, because we know he's elite, he's the second tight end in ADP, all of that. But do you think there's even more there that we haven't seen yet with Brock Bowers?
Yeah, I love that you went there, and I honestly really do think that he could reach a new level. So first off, unrelated to chip blocks, we saw Kubiak focus a lot on one guy in the passing game. And if anyone is going to get, anywhere near JSN type of volume, it would be Brock Bowers in that offense. So that's pretty cool in itself. Brock Bowers set 24 chip blocks all of last season, which among starting tight ends, that was probably the single lowest mark in the league. 6.2% rate. That's just tiny. He caught every single one of his passes off of a chip. 7 of 7 for 73 yards. And so I think a lot of the reason for that is that Chip Kelly was mostly using him as an outside receiver, a slot receiver. Klint Kubiak loves to put his guys in line with the line of scrimmage. And so that's going to give him an easy opportunity to chip a lot more. And then, he can run a flat route, a fade route, and be, the first read for, if we're going to guess, probably Fernando Mendoza. So I think it should go great for him in terms of his fantasy context. Go ahead.
So I want to talk about an underrated Rams tight end. I want to take you to LA. Colby Parkinson had 7 targets on 14 red zone chips, which is really interesting being that the Rams have the best wide receiver room in the NFL. But how much of the red zone chip usage translates to touchdown opportunity? And is Parkinson somebody fantasy managers should be watching out for?
Yeah, I think there's a really good possibility of that. The one way that we would throw that out is if Kenyon Sadiq gets drafted by the Rams. But right now,
no, we don't want that.
It would, Sadiq is going to be great wherever he goes. But I do think, the room that the Rams have right now, as far as tight ends, is one of the strongest in the league. They would often put 3 of them out on the field at the same time. That's something, again, that not a lot of people are doing. And so, Parkinson had these certain specific weeks where he was really popping off in the fantasy sense. And it's because he was really trustworthy as a red zone guy. And that was kind of their plan to get him loose. We see it with Parkinson. And the other guy we really see it with is Jake Ferguson, where they would set the chip in the red zone. They would kind of lose their coverage defender as a result of that. And they, these are big body targets who are a great outlet for their quarterbacks to hit in that spot. So yeah, I think Parkinson, and then the other guy worth considering, for a year 2 breakout would be Terrence Ferguson, but he's not really the chip block type, and he's not really the same caliber of red zone weapon. So we really could be in a spot to watch out for Parkinson, kind of taking over some of the Tyler Higbee workload and keeping these good vibes going.
You mentioned that a lot of times the coaches that used it were teams that didn't have maybe great upfront protection for their quarterbacks, or teams with younger quarterbacks or guys who just needed extra time to get the ball out. It brings me to Kevin Stefanski coming to Atlanta, which is sort of a mixed bag of things because, in terms of their rating, the offensive line was a pretty good pass blocking unit for the Falcons. But now you're dealing with a quarterback, most likely in Tua Tagovailoa, who sort of has been kind of a get the ball out of his hands quickly, maybe try to give him some extra time, especially to give, to protect him, maybe from himself in some cases. Where do you anticipate the Falcons sort of landing here? Does Stefanski go more with the chip? Does he do less with it? Because we already know Kyle Pitts sort of thrived in that situation. And every year we keep pretzeling our logic to try and make Kyle Pitts a thing. I guess I'm asking you to give me one more reason to not give up on Kyle Pitts.
So if you want me to, kind of gas up Kyle Pitts, I think I would not use chip blocks to do that. Kyle Pitts is a total move tight end. He's gonna be in the slot a lot of the time, and so with Tua, throwing the ball quickly, I think it's very possible that Stefanski changes up his strategy, especially, he's handing off play calling. He's given it to, I don't remember the guy's name. I think it's Tommy Reese or something like that. But it's
Tommy Reese, yeah.
Nice. So it's the guy who was his OC last year, but is actually now going to be the play caller in Atlanta. And so for Pitts, I mean, I think we could see those guys use him the same way that they used Harold Fannin, which was really exciting. But that's going to be in a move situation. It's going to be kind of more outside. And then if they also have a blocking tight end on the field, that guy could potentially be the chipper. Probably wouldn't get the targets, but it also means, there will be not as many guys taking the target share in that case. It'll be, basically London, Pitts, Bijan, and they're getting the entire bulk of the workload. So, I mean, if you need faith in Pitts, it would be more of a target share, and also just the fact that they love heavy personnel in that, former Cleveland coaching room.
Got it. All right. Good enough for me. I want to kind of pivot to talking about defenses because, you wrote that defenses that got chipped more, in a lot of cases, got more sacks, forced more turnovers. You and I were talking before the show that somehow Myles Garrett actually got better when he was chipped. Have you been able to figure out the logic for that so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was confused by that at first. It seems counterintuitive, but what's really happening is when you have an incredible pass rusher like Myles Garrett, like Houston has with Daniil Anderson and Will Hunter Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson on both sides, like Pittsburgh has with TJ Watt. All 5 of these teams that you're going to see in the top 5 of chip block rate are going to have incredible pass rushers, and those guys are going to get theirs. Offenses are kind of, scrambling to really help out on these guys a little bit extra just so they don't get completely game broken. And so they're going to end up getting a lot of sacks as it is. Myles Garrett, really do want to focus on him for a second because, as everyone knows, he's a freak of nature, but somehow he is even better against chip blocks. That one, don't know if I found a specific explanation. He just, plays like he's possessed. He goes full God mode when, someone disrespects him by throwing extra help, or I guess respects him really. But so he got 29 pressures against chip blocks this season. That's 10 more than anyone ever had in another season that we've tracked. And he's in second place too. He had 19 in a different season. So, definitely just an incredible thing that we're seeing out of him specifically. Browns were a solid fantasy defense this year. I figured they're going to continue to be a very solid option.
And to try to take this information and spin it into a fantasy sense, in your opinion, like, you've done more studying on this than any of us have. Do you, like, if you were targeting a defense for fantasy purposes, are you thinking that having an elite pass rusher is top? Is it a team that creates a lot of pressure as a whole? Are you targeting a weak offensive line? Like, I'm sure it's probably a combination of the 3, but what do you think the most important ingredients is when looking to stream a defense?
Yeah, I can go into all of that a little bit. And I mean, you guys are the authorities when it comes to, do you pick one early or do you decide to stream? So that's, up to the player themselves. That's everyone's choice. But if you do decide to pick early, I love a defense with a good pass rusher, or ideally with 2. I would love to pick the Texans as my fantasy defense because, you're going to be lining up those 2 guys on the edge pretty much every play. And that is going to make life really hard on everybody on the other side of the ball. Like, that's what creates sacks, obviously, but it's also what creates interceptions. Like, when you get pressure, that's where a lot of the turnovers are coming from. And so, yeah, I think you definitely want to look for an elite pass rusher from a fantasy perspective a little more than you would like an elite linebacker or elite corner or something like that. And then, as far as streaming, yeah, if you have, let's say, Hutchinson against the Vikings, that's a great time to stream the Lions. They were a little bit more streaming tier last year. I think they could bounce back because there is a lot of talent just across that entire room. If they stay healthy, like the Lions are a great defensive option. But if they're facing an offense that is going to be forced to chip or forced to provide extra help, then that offense could have a really rough day.
So, James, even though I'm trying to vote out defenses out of my fantasy leagues amongst my friends that just keep voting for it, but is there a defense that might be poised for a breakout in 2026 based on how often their edge rushers are being chipped in 2025?
Yeah. I did find a few different options for that. The one that kind of stood out, this was a little bit surprising, it's not one that a lot of people would think about, was the Indianapolis Colts. So they have young edge rushers led by Laiatu Latu. He faced almost as many chips as Jared Verse, and that was, the second most by any player that was a first or second year player. So he's getting chipped a lot. People respect him. And we see, year 3 breakouts for a lot of these guys as they get accustomed to how to pass rush. And then another thing is the Colts have a defensive coordinator that, first of all, is regarded as a really, special coach, Lou Anarumo. And then also in his second year implementing the system, could really get a little more creative with his pass rush and, start stunning guys a little bit more or start dropping guys into coverage, disguising his blitzes. So yeah, between all of that and the fact that Latu could be in line for a breakout based on his chip rate, that's one I would look at a little more than we have in previous years.
So sort of along with that, right, with the chip blocks and pressure and all that sort of thing, one of the big changes we've seen in recent years in defenses has been the increased use of 2 high safeties, right? This was supposedly the thing that helped everybody figure out the Kansas City Chiefs. We can debate that at another time. But, for people who maybe are uninitiated, explain sort of what that is and how we've seen this change into teams doing that a little more defensively.
Yep. The concept of 2 high coverage, it's 3 different types of coverage. It's cover 2, cover 4, cover 6. And it basically just means that both of your safeties are starting a little closer to the rest of your defense. And then they are both dropping back in opposite directions into coverage. And so this is very, very truly a league-wide trend. It's happening everywhere. We see on this image right here that everyone in the NFL, every single defense played split safety coverage at least 30% of the time this season. 2 high and split safety mean the same thing, by the way. Exact same. And so that is pretty cool because it had not been happening before. We had, 2018 to 2020, there were 8 or so defenses a season who would be under that 30% mark. And then it just started moving up and up and up. And now everyone has caught on to this thing. So offenses are seeing it all the time. And some of the best defenses out there are really, making this an efficient strategy. The Seahawks were a team that did it very frequently this year. They used a lot of cover 6, which didn't used to be a popular thing in the past, but it drove them to a Super Bowl. Chiefs were the pioneers, like you said, and that worked really well for them for a little while. And then, people did catch on. You start seeing it more. You develop a little bit of a counter.
And again, just trying to put a fantasy spin on all. You were touching on the Colts and Lou Anarumo, and I kind of credit him with being the mastermind behind this. He did it 2 years in a row to Josh and Mahomes in the playoffs, shut those guys down, and then I feel like the rest of the league copied him. But how does this apply? How can we apply this into a fantasy sense, right? Is it less big plays, more like slot and possession receivers now are going to get targets? How can we take this and kind of apply it to what we do?
Yeah. So, what I would do is I would look at the specific offensive players who have already performed the best against this. And we found some really cool stuff off of that. So first off, JSN was just way above everybody else in terms of the production against Too High. He ended up with 841 receiving yards against Too High last season, and nobody else had 700. So he was nearly 200 yards out in front of the rest of the field. So people are like, okay, JSN had this enormous year. Is it really sustainable, especially with no Kubiak there? We don't know. But like, he is doing something that, you know, the rest of the NFL needs to start doing, which is figuring out how to beat this kind of coverage, both underneath and deep. Like, you know, Too High is designed as a thing that will take away that deep portion of the field. But if you go to the middle against cover 2, if you get a one-on-one outside go route against cover 4, like, there is a possibility, if you're a really talented receiver, that you can make that work and produce off of that. Some other guys that we saw doing really well against this, who could be in line for breakouts or, you know, continued progression after solid rookie years, would be Emeka Egbuka and Tedero McMillan. Both of them were in the top 15 in receiving yards against this coverage, and we're also top or near the top of the list in targets. So like, they clearly have a lot of trust, and you know, those two teams are going to be trying to make those guys number ones. I think that's pretty clear from their, you know, team building strategy. So I'm really excited to see how it progresses with the entire league playing a lot of Too High every game. It gets more valuable.
So let's go to Pittsburgh, man. You talk about number ones. Now we have 2 number ones in Pittsburgh with DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman. In your article, you spoke about how Too High data suggests both of these guys could really be effective in PPR leagues. What is it about their profile that makes them a fit for what McCarthy wants to run? And is there a case that one or maybe both of them ends up being undervalued heading into 2026 drafts?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I think especially Pittman could end up undervalued. Like, he has been a strong PPR guy for a while, and you know, doesn't necessarily get the shine that he deserves. He was more the kind of underneath outlet option, I would say, against Too High. Like, if he would get a one-on-one underneath, or like find a soft zone underneath, I guess would be more the idea. He was getting, you know, these easy, you know, slant routes just over and over, fade routes, whatever you wanted to do. And so, you know, he caught 40 balls against that coverage last year. DK did not have quite the same volume, but he was actually highly efficient when he was targeted. He caught just over 80% of his targets when facing Too High. So like, he could be more the intermediate option on the other side of the field. If it is Aaron Rodgers back, like, that's going to be read 1 and read 2 in some order when he gets this coverage. And so, you know, I think both of them could be really, really productive just off of that. Another guy we saw be really efficient was Pat Freiermuth. You know, Rodgers is a veteran. He knows how to use his guys and, you know, break down whatever he is seeing with the defense opposite him. And, you know, he has worked with McCarthy for a long, long time. So if that's the quarterback they elect to go with, then it could produce, you know, really impressive fantasy results.
It warms my heart to hear you say that Michael Pittman may be a little bit undervalued, because I've been trying to tell my esteemed co-hosts this for weeks, and it's like getting them to eat broccoli to get them to admit to this. So I appreciate that. But I guess it does sort of lend to the fact that the Colts felt like Michael Pittman was expendable because they went out and re-signed Alec Pierce to a pretty sizable deal. So do we see, you know, maybe greater use? Obviously, we'll see greater usage for Alec Pierce, but is there a way that he can be a guy who helps beat some of these split safety coverages? Can they find a way to kind of make him that lightning rod in the offense?
Yes, absolutely. So with Pittman, you know, he talked about him as broccoli. Like he, I did think that was funny. But he's not going to get you the deep balls. He's not going to get you the touchdowns. Alec Pierce has that splash play capability. And then he is also like a big body, quick twitch. I think he's 6'3" and runs a 4.4, sub 4.4 or something like that. And so, he is really a do-it-all receiver, and he has some of the same capabilities as a Jackson Smith and Jigba. Alec Pierce was the number one receiver in yards per target against too high coverage last season. So the Colts were like, okay, we have this guy in the building, and like, sure, we've been doing a good job executing these shorter routes to Pittman, but like Alec Pierce is dynamic. He's tearing it up. Like if we give him more of that work, I don't see why he shouldn't thrive. He showed a really complete type of game last year compared to like the deep ball only thing he had been doing in previous seasons. So I see no reason why that couldn't continue to expand and he could become like a really top flight type of guy.
And I know in your article you are excited about the Arizona Cardinals pass catchers. So I want you to talk on that, but I'm going to throw a two-part at you, right? Who do you like more between Michael Wilson and Marvin Harrison Jr.? And you touched on Brock Bowers earlier. Is Trey McBride your tight end one, or can Brock give him a run for his money this year?
Oh man, that is a tough question. Yeah, I'm gonna think about that for a second while I talk about the receivers. So I really liked what we saw out of Wilson late in the year last year. And one of the craziest things really that I came across when I was going through this research was Jacoby Brissett was tied for the NFL lead in touchdowns against split safety coverage last year. Like, who would have thought that? Not me, personally. He threw 10 tutties, and 5 of them were to Wilson. Wilson was the only guy with 5 touchdowns against split safety, which is really, really interesting because this is usually a thing that's played kind of in the field, between the 20s, rather than in the red zone where you're going to play man. So, like, the fact that he was able to get 5 touchdowns on mostly like deeper throws, that's really promising, especially with a guy in Mike LaFleur, who has been working with Sean McVay, who is well known to shred this coverage to pieces, just with whoever he has on his offense. It's been Stafford, Nakua recently, even MVP. With Goff and Kupp, back in years ago. Yeah, there you go, MVP, absolutely right. So I think, you could take kind of that blueprint, and these are not guys who are going to go super high up in the draft, but maybe at the very end, if you're playing 2 quarterbacks and you want to go for Brissett, he's probably going to get numbers, even if that team doesn't get wins. And that also means he's going to be throwing more. So a guy who is near the top of the board in McBride, personally, I think I would lean McBride because he was so far out in front of the field this year, over Bowers. But don't hold me to that. We could change up on that. They're a perfect number one.
No, it's March 19th. Right? That take is written in ink now.
Okay, all right. I guess I'll have him in every league. I gotta put my money where my mouth is. Okay, no, but no, I am really excited about Trey McBride. If you go back to the chip blocks, this is not going to surprise anyone, but he had the most targets, receptions, and yards against when throwing a chip block. And then, it was the same idea against too high coverage. He was the only tight end in the top 10 for which stat is this? Oh, yards over expected, which is a cool one. That's a next gen stat that all of you should check out. It's indicative of a lot of things about a guy's talent, but also led again in targets, receptions, and yards. And when you have a guy like that, you just kind of send it. Like it's really showing that he's doing it better than everyone else.
We didn't get, is it Michael Wilson Marvin Harrison?
No, yeah, sorry. I did say Wilson.
We got to know.
No, for sure. I'm definitely on Wilson pretty strong this year. You know, Harrison's been super up and down. I was really in on him last year. I thought he was going to figure it out, and that's not what we saw. So especially with this too high data in mind, but also just with how the second half of last year went, like, yeah, I would say Wilson has kind of taken it over there.
Nice. Well, let's pivot to the Patriots. I mean, who will be taking over their production against too high? I mean, could it be Booty? Could it be Dobbs? I mean, both were highly efficient on low volume in 2025.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. So I think the idea is kind of that we need to think about who is taking over the workload of Stephon Diggs. And that could be both of them, but I think the reason they went out and gave a really big chunk of money to Romeo Dobbs is because they kind of see him that way. So I could easily foresee this being a career year for him. You know, we saw Drake May being super accurate last year. Just, you know, high completion percentage guy. And Dobbs has generally been really good at getting himself open in zone. So, you know, that lends itself to an accurate quarterback who can just hit him in stride and get him going. And so, you know, Stephon Diggs, older guy who had a little bit of a fantasy renaissance in the early part of last year, Dobbs seems to fit right into that space. I do love Booty as well. Like if you're gonna you know, be looking at either one of them in a draft, maybe you just go for both. Because if you're talking about what I was saying earlier with who is going to run that outside go and be cover 4 or something like that, that is Kayshon Boutte to a T. We saw it as far as the touchdown production more than just about anyone else last season. And, you know, so with more volume and more opportunities, that should only continue to rise.
Hey, well, James, we appreciate the time. A lot of great work. For everybody who's out there looking for it, you can go find it at NFL.com. Look for stuff by the Next Gen Stats team. James, with a few articles up there about the chip blocks. It's called The Secret Weapon NFL Offenses Are Using to Buy QBs an Extra Half Second. Also, some of the too high safety work, the coverage that turned the Seahawks into Super Bowl winners and is taking the NFL by storm. James, we appreciate it. Anything you got working on? Anything in the pipeline maybe folks should keep an eye out for?
Yeah, for sure. So within the last week or so, we did get another one up on the site. So if you are looking for what Next Gen Stats believes are the best free agency fits of this recent crop of signings, someone that's going to go really well with the new coach or coordinator that they're working with or fill a gap that existed for that team, then yeah, definitely check that article out. It is live. These are all on NFL.com. You can find them under my name or under the Next Gen Stats Analytics team. We're also going to be putting one out on the kind of a draft primer, what we think are ideal fits from a Next Gen perspective as we get close to the draft, what could work out in the first round. I'm not going to say it's like a hardline mock. It's just like some speculation on the subject. And then I would definitely say to follow our Twitter at Next Gen Stats. We have new stuff coming out on there all the time. Some really good insights that, you know, you can't get elsewhere. So
awesome. Sounds great. Be sure to check that out. NFL.com/NGS, one of the easy ways to find it. And as you mentioned, follow the Next Gen Stats Twitter account as well. But that'll do it for this edition of the NFL Fantasy Football Podcast. Stay happy, safe, and healthy. Do good and live well. Enjoy the tournament, everybody. It's that time of year. And we will talk to you all again on Tuesday.